Welcome to episode 3 of the Teaching and Learning podcast, Focus on First Year. Perhaps it might be useful to state at the beginning of this episode on assessment precisely what it is not going to cover. I'm not going to talk about dumbing down standards in exams or suggesting ways of making assessments easier so that students leave UCD knowing less. I can assure you that there is very little educational tree hugging in this episode. What I do hope to persuade you of is how powerful assessment approaches are at controlling the way that students learn. Also, how well-designed assessment and feedback can drive deep and sustained learning, even from the start of first year. There is a key point to bear in mind when thinking about assessment for first years. That is the fundamental attitudes about assessment that most students bring with them to university. In the main, our students have just gone through the latter years of a secondary educational system where their learning is geared towards performance in one set of formal terminal exams, the Leaving Certificate. This being so, it should not be very surprising that first-year students take some time to adjust to assessment at university and continue to put an overemphasis on learning for the terminal exams, often at the cost of other forms of assessment. This type of strategic learning behaviour is not a new or uniquely Irish phenomenon by any means. The key research on deep and surface learning is over 40 years old. In the early 1970s, Snyder in M.I.T. studied how the Institute's students dealt with large amounts of factual content with which they were presented. Snyder noted that students adopted very strategic methods of guessing what was needed for the exams, and then only focused on retaining that knowledge. By doing so, the students limited their learning to match the examination structure. What Snyder's work revealed was how the exam system teaches students to choose between what they feel is important to learn and what they can avoid learning. He concluded that the way MIT's academics designed their assessments set what he called the hidden curriculum, and that this was the actual curriculum followed by students. Snyder's findings about the power of assessment to drive student learning behaviour has been replicated by other researchers over the years. What has also been demonstrated is that the type and timing of assessment has considerable impact on the kind of learning that students engage in when preparing for that assessment. Scouller from the University of Sydney has studied the differences in knowledge acquisition between students preparing for different types of assessment. She found that students believed that they would be most successful in terminal exams, particularly MCQs and short question exams, if they adopted a surface approach to knowledge acquisition. In such exams, they primarily relied on short-term memorising of information. In fact, many students prefer terminal exams rather than coursework because terminal exams allow them to delay studying until nearer the end of the semester. As one of the students in Scouller's research noted, I prefer an MCQ exam to writing an assignment essay because it takes a lot less time to prepare for and involves a lot less thought and effort. Assessment type and load in first year, particularly in the first semester of first year, have been found to have a very significant impact on how first years engage with their studies. Assessment workload also represents the most frequently mentioned stressor for undergraduates. It should be noted that in some schools and programmes in UCD, formal exam hall-based exams are now not used at all in the first semester of first year. Instead, students are assessed using a variety of approaches spread across the first semester, including individual essays or lab exercises, class tests, and individual and group projects. While initially challenging for the students, these approaches are proving very successful in driving higher levels of student engagement with their studies and deeper levels of learning. Above all, this approach allows students to work without the distraction of, or indeed the escape into, old exam-focused strategic learning. This approach to assessing first years is strongly supported by the work of Gibbs and Simpson and the seminal research of Chickering and Gamson. These scholars have all emphasised that assessment tasks need to be designed in a way that compels students to spread their study evenly over the semester. They also advise that assessment tasks should communicate clear and high expectation to students about the quality of work that is expected of them. Gibbs and Simpson have also looked at the differences in the learning behaviours of students in preparation for coursework and for formal examinations. They draw the conclusion that formal examinations taken on their own are a poor predictor of any subsequent performance, such as success at work. Also, marks gained by students for coursework are a better predictor of long-term academic achievement than are exams. I'm not dodging the argument that it is only by assessing students in the exam hall situation that we can be really sure that we are seeing students' own work, and that the potential for plagiarising and cheating with coursework is too great. It would be my personal opinion that in the coming years a move away from terminal closed book exams will occur largely because the prevention of cheating in the exam hall is becoming increasingly difficult. Smaller and more powerful communication devices already make it possible for students to conceal and access large amounts of pertinent information in exam settings, and this type of cheating is becoming a widespread problem internationally. The challenge, therefore, is to design assessments that are difficult to plagiarise and to benefit from the growing technological gains in detection software. Central to effective assessment is the use of feedback. I have to admit that while I know giving feedback is important to my students, every year I find it a time-consuming activity. We were lucky to have had a recent visit to UCD by David Nicol of Strathclyde University, who is a recognised expert on feedback. Nicol's research has shown that the standard teacher-to-student feedback, such as the kind I've been using, can be limited to the students becoming passive recipients of the lecturer's views. He advocates that feedback should be more of a dialogue between teacher and student to help them strengthen their own self-assessment skills. In his research, he has shown that the most effective feedback approaches are those that force the student to take more responsibility for their own learning and help them develop the capacity to make accurate judgments about the quality of their own work. Nicol also recommends a greater use of student-to-student work in critiquing as opposed to grading their work. He argues that good feedback, particularly involving students in a more active role, should take less time and be less of a burden on staff. And for that reason alone, I'm certainly going to try some of his approaches next September. A high-level assessment review group has been working on a project in UCD since September 2010. And in this project, they have been looking at the assessment load on students, particularly in the first year. Led by Elizabeth Noonan and Dr. Geraldine O'Neill, they have also prepared an excellent set of resources for module and programme coordinators who may wish to review their assessment and feedback approaches. These resources are available on www.ucd.ie/teaching. I strongly recommend these resources to you, and I also thank the Assessment Review Group for the work that they have been doing. As I said in the beginning of this episode, changing how we assess students is not about being easier on them. In fact, what we learned from the research is that well-designed assessment with timely feedback takes students longer to complete and forces them to work harder and to reach deeper levels of learning than some of the more traditional assessment approaches. Not only that, it also increases student engagement and helps them take a more active and independent role in their own learning.